You know, LR, you need to get yourself one of those teacher cards. That we roll stuff in and out of.
Teacher card.
Oh,
You get these little boxes with wheels on them so we can cart our stuff in and out every day. Get things going. It feels a little warm in here. I'm hoping
yeah,
that
it's
it's,
warm.
and it's usually cold. So I'm wondering maybe if the AC just kicks in at, I don't know,
Fine.
you know, if
Did he
it's
turn 'em
time.
on yet? Because he
thought-
said that these weren't on yet.
I don't know the answer to that.
I know that in the conference room, she's like, well, let me check and make sure the AC's on.
We need to use the mic too.
Yeah, I know.
Do you want to hear?
Giving us all.
I was just wondering if somebody will tap on it to make sure it's on.
Yeah, he checked it.
Okay,
Is it on?
6 degrees from Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Put it on, I'll switch.
There's only 2 microphones.
No, I think it's- I want to save my battery as much as I possibly can. It'll go 8 hours. And I have it plugged in, so that's good. A little status meeting.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna I'll let Sergio know you and I won't be in that one.
Okay. It does feel like
It's gotten
Did
hot.
you turn it off?
She was messing with it, and the light came on.
Green light's on.
Yeah,
I don't think
It
you
just
really
had
need to be
been-
in there anyway, at least I know I
it's
know.
on an automated system, so you just.
So it just hadn't kicked in yet.
I have to run home and see what thing, after you guys doing it, make sure we're everything.
Okay, I think we've got sound, right? I don't know what Tiffany's doing over there.
I'm just gonna make sure that if you turn it off.
All right. I'm ready when you are, Laura.
I am ready.
All right. Does that sound like it's coming out okay?
Yeah.
Okay, the tend to mask things, if you will. The first thing I want to do is just, because we are on video, I wanted to just kind of be a little bit formal to introduce the members of the team and where they're from. So all the way down here on my left is Brenda Blackman. She teaches at Robinson Middle School in the Vaser room. So she did not sit with us at the table next year, but she is very involved with Topeka NEA, so kind of an expert in that field. And then just to my left here is Tiffany Beasley. She is joining me at Topeka High School this year. She will be a library media specialist in the famous, world famous, by the way, Topeka High School Library. Also new to the team. And Jermaine Leusler here to my right is a 5th grade teacher. She was on the team last year, so Jermaine is our expert in elementary issues, so we are thrilled that she's back on the team. Michelle Kirk, also on the team last year, teacher at Highland Park High School, debate coach and a variety of different things. She is our linguist this year. Since we've lost Matt Baer, he's decided to spend the summer being a dad. That's okay. And then all the way on the end, you all know Jeremy Gibson. He is the president of NEA-T Topeka. He is our alternate, so he's kind of, it's not that he didn't shower, we just kind of put him down there at the end, so. He's an alternate on the team. We may have 1 or 2 members who need to be out. I know Brenda has to be out Wednesday morning, so Jeremy will be here with us to sit in that seat if necessary. So just want to start with that, okay?
Okay. Thank you, Lucinda. Can you hear me? Yeah, good. First off, I want to apologize for being late this morning. I did give Lucinda a call to let her know that I was trying to finalize some things with our insurance renewal. That's been a pretty strenuous process this off-season. Our renewal came in very high. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth as we try to get a premium renewal that we can be comfortable with and one that we think is reasonable. And I can tell you it's probably the toughest year that I've had in trying to negotiate that with our providers. So I appreciate your indulgence in that matter. Our team we don't have anyone new in our team this year, but starting down on the my far left, we have Ms. Deb Ramberg, our General Director of Human Resources, who is back for her second year with our negotiating team. Next to her is Ms. Sarah Sharp, who is our General Director of Early Childhood and Elementary Education. Mr. Gary Mickey, our General Director of Fiscal Services. Myself, Deputy Superintendent of Operations. To my right is Ms. Lori Hope, the board's attorney, who is serving on our team once again. The person who is not here but will be joining us here shortly is Ms. Billy Wallace, who is the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. She is currently out at Bishop, welcoming back our new teachers. So she will be joining us as soon as she can break away from that duty. So we're back again, as we are every year, hopefully to reach an agreement with a package that is mutually beneficial or mutually acceptable anyway to both parties. So we're ready to start.
We are ready to start. I'm going to start with an opening statement, if you don't mind. There's a few things I'd like to say first before we even get started. I have a copy of it that I'm going to give to you, LR, but I will read it again for the video feed. Okay, I'm going to read it as is, otherwise I will editorialize too much. I wrote this down so that I would read this word for word rather than rambling on and wasting the time of either of the teams assembled. 2021 may go on record as being one of the most challenging school years in the history of Topeka Public Schools. From the spring of 2020 to today, our staff has been forced to pivot over and over again to meet the challenges handed us by a pandemic that could never have been predicted. While the pandemic is clearly not over, we know a great deal more now than we did then. I would like to take this opportunity to thank your team, LR, and especially the efforts of our superintendent, Dr. Anderson, to keep the doors of our school open, whatever that may have looked like. I appreciate the fact that you kept avenues of communication open from our conversations last July to our conversations throughout the school year to help us clearly understand your challenges while being willing to listen to the challenges of NEA Topeka. We did not always agree, but I feel as if we were always heard. I remember specifically one conversation that Richard Bolajak and I had with you, LR, and Dr. Anderson. We discussed school closures, sanitation procedures, substitute issues, and what it might look like when, not if, COVID entered our schools. My takeaway from that conversation was that Dr. Anderson would do whatever she could to make sure that no children or adults were harmed on her watch. That one idea helped me and many others navigate this year. Our administration, under her leadership, understood that no matter what decisions were made, half of our community would be angry and half would be pleased, and there was no avoiding the hard decisions that had to be made. I also need to mention that we appreciate that our leadership was willing to listen to science and follow the guidelines of the CDC, the Kansas Health Department, and most importantly, the recommendations of the Shawnee County Health Department. Knowing that attention was being paid to these entities allowed students and staff and students to have a better idea of what would happen next in a very unpredictable world. And at the end of the day, the efforts of your team and ours allowed me and my colleagues to do what we love to do, teach children. I think I speak for all of us when I say as long as I have children to teach, I can weather any storm. Now the storm has subsided a little bit, but there will still be hard decisions in the future. Over the next few days, we may agree to disagree on certain issues, but at the end of the day, our students are at the core of all we do. At the end of the school year, I can testify that we were tired. The students were tired, and it was a noticeably short summer. But it is time to begin again and continue the work we have been chosen to do. Again, I want to thank the administration and the school board for all of their support of the last 16 months. And let's hope and pray that we never have to experience a series of events like this again. Thank you. I just wanted to put that out there for you guys to understand. It's been a hard road on both sides. There's a lot of details over the last year, but just kind of knowing where everybody was at and that we got to the other side. We got to the other side. That's it. Okay? Any questions or concerns about it at this point?
Don't have any questions, Lucinda, but I want to thank you for your comments. You are certainly very accurate when you say that it was a challenging year for everyone. Whether you were a classroom teacher, whether you were a food service person or a custodian, it really required everyone to be pulling in the same direction in order for us to have the type of year that we did and through all of the challenges still provide the educational opportunities that we did for our kids. Like you said, that's why we're here. And our case too, we have put children first. The one proposal that we brought to the table this year, we vetted that against our vision and our mission statement to make sure that it was a proposal that would further each one of those, whether it was the mission or the vision of People Public Schools, which is about enhancing the education opportunities for our students. So we look forward to these discussions. Like you said, there's going to be things that we're going to have to agree to disagree on, but hopefully we find more common ground than not at the end of the day once we conclude discussions. How would you like to begin? We certainly have our thoughts, but who would you like to have the floor first?
If you don't mind, I think since the main issue that you have on your letter is related to the high school day, and Billy Wallace has been behind that quite a bit, I think I might go ahead and start. One of the first issues I want to bring up with is related to the elementary school. And so Sarah is here, if you guys don't mind. I am looking at Article 36, salary differentials, specifically related to the combo classrooms. One of the things that we have heard in our discussions with the district is that because there is going to be an as yet to be determined reduced number of students in the school, that we may see more combo classrooms in the elementary school this year than we've seen in previous years. So I refer you to Article 36. In the contract itself that I'm looking at, it's specifically page 60 is the language that we're looking at.
you don't mind, Lucinda, when you start off with Article 36, that is something that is put it under compensation. Normally, we talk about compensation last,
Right,
and I would prefer that we do that again this year. If we look at your interest letter that was passed to us, which is about, well, probably 2 pages before we get to your request for information.
Mm.
On those 2 pages, about a page and a half of it all deals with financial considerations. Pretty long list of bullet points that all have to do with funding of some sort.
Mhm.
And if we're going to address those, I think it is very important that everyone understand what the financial realities are that we are facing in the public schools this fiscal year.
Right.
We spent some time last year having Gary review the financial situation that existed then. That situation certainly has not improved any. If anything, has worsened from last year. So I think that if you don't mind, before we start to address anything financially, and again, I would prefer to do that at the end of our discussions. I'd like to have Gary take some time and kind of set the stage for just exactly what we're looking at as a district as we get into our next academic year and as we get into our fiscal year. Some of the very daunting challenges that we have and challenges that I kind of alluded to in the letter that we passed.
Right.
Okay, as far as financial headwinds. And hopefully you'll be able to see why I referred to them as financial headwinds. So would that be okay with you?
Yeah, that's perfectly okay with me. Just to clarify, we already have language for the combo classroom, so we weren't looking for more money. We were just looking for a slight language change. So that's why I put that up front, but I'm more than willing to listen to what we call the Gary Mankey show. We like it. And, you know, because you did stress in your letter that it is a tight year fiscally, and I believe we had that discussion at the end of the year last year as well. So I'm perfectly willing to deal with finances in the morning because my brain works better in the AM than it does in the PM. So we're fine with that. Gary, you have some handouts?
Yeah. You wanna help me listen to that? Okay. And Laura, you want to do? I'm gonna hand you that. We're gonna talk about coronavirus first, just like you did, because I, you know, it always sucks all the air out of the room. And then we're gonna talk about this thing, which you don't know about. It's called revenue neutral rate, which is a really dumb thing. We'll talk about that. And then we'll just do a kind of a review again of what we did last year, but in that order. Is that okay? Yep. And then I got an email from Scott that said that we need to speak directly into the microphone because we're having some trouble in the media center.
Okay.
Gary?
We just need to get closer to them. She's doing a good job, yes.
Yeah, she should have plenty because I made 25 copies of everything.
Thank you.
First thing you talking about? Second?
Where are the kids when we need them? I'm telling you. This is the second one we're talking about? And this is the third one we're talking about.
Thank you.
Get myself copies.
We give you a nod.
I think so.
Yeah, they can grab and take them home. I'll sign them.
I didn't think you all had it yet.
Yeah, I mean,
You want
I
this
guess
back,
we work much, but
Just
I'll
in
sign
case.
them after.
Thank you.
A newly minted friend.
Yeah.
That might add some value to that
All right,
signature.
so I guess I'll grab that microphone from you, Deputy Superintendent. Hopefully they can hear me in the media center. Get yourself card. All right. So, as Lucinda opened up with some discussion about this past year and coronavirus, which was extremely well thought out and was from the heart. I definitely could tell that was from your heart. I'm going to give the team, and probably even our team, a little bit of update in terms of the financials. What's happened to us financially with the coronavirus? You know, we've gotten stimulus money, and I think it's important that, you know, that we share what we've done up to this point. As has been mentioned, right? Nobody was prepared for a pandemic. And I just want to, just in case this gets published somewhere, I'm taking credit for Pandemic Today, PTD at the top. So if anybody else uses that, I want to know that it was used in this room first, that Pandemic Today. But that $8.8 million is what we've spent of relief money, okay, on stuff related to the pandemic. And we just work at the top, the funds that we got early on, the CARES Act ESSER 1, flow through regular title programs. The dollars behave like title programs. You know, they're aimed at the same type of students. We got $3.97 million awarded. We have through September of 22 to defease those amounts. To date, we've spent about $3.9 million of those dollars. We have about $89,000, almost $90,000 left, and those are non-public dollars. So the ESSER 1 is a little different in that part of that allocation had to be earmarked for our non-public schools, the same schools that we deliver title services to, you know, the St. Matthews, and you guys know them. So ESSER 1, there was those flow-through non-public dollars to us. The balance of the coronavirus relief money, they're dealing with the public directly. So we're not going to have to deal with that, and probably the non-publics, and Billy and I appreciate that, because that wasn't a lot of fun. It was 3 calculations, I think, Billy, before we got the actual amount right. 3 calculations and a threatened lawsuit, not nationally, not locally, to get the non-public amount right. So I think the folks at the federal level said, hey, let's not go through that again on the balance of the funds. We'll deal with the non-publics directly. So
I think that was a discussion we had towards the end of the year last year.
yeah.
So, thank you for that update.
Yeah, so CARES ESSER 1, 3.9 million. We had a little bit of non-public share. What we do with it, and this is a real high level, and if you're extremely interested in how many face masks and death shields and how many ounces of hand sanitizer, we have that data. But what I tried to roll it into are some common categories of that $3.9 million. And that first go round, 36% was spent on child nutrition programs, 17% on transportation, keeping our transportation infrastructure intact. Going back to the governor's order, right? We should keep people employed. And our strategy was not knowing, right, when schools would open back up, if our contractor could not survive not having any money the last quarter, would they financially be able to open back up when we were ready to go again in August? So we have to keep that infrastructure. So about 17% of those first Easter dollars were utilized that way. And this you'll see is a common thread, about 22% in personal protective equipment for our students and our staff, 17% on disinfecting you've seen in your buildings, the fog machines, all the things that are going on. That first round, 4% on internet service for qualifying families and 4% on unemployment. Unemployment claims last spring, starting in March, really through December, went crazy. We're a self-insured unemployment entity, and I contend that probably about 80% of the claims filed against the district that we paid were probably fraudulent. We were no different than anybody else, and the coronavirus relief dollars, both the state of Kansas and the local entities were able to use those dollars to pay for those claims. We had claims, our May, June, July claims. July claims were about $1.14 million. Our quarterly unemployment claims prior to that, if they're between $3,000 and $5,000 a month, so that kind of gives you a feel for the amount of fraudulent claims that we're making. And I maybe somebody sitting here, I know we've got people on our side of the table that received a notice saying, "Congratulations! Did anybody get one? You?" Yeah. You are getting unemployment. Well, you did, right? Those terribly fraudulent. Good news in that department, I think we've turned the corner. The state has put some implementation, have implemented some safety checks, right, to do some two-system validation before they actually process a claim. So that has really slowed that nonsense down. But that's what we did, right? We had no idea, like you, early on, what caused COVID. Was it airborne? Did you get it from touching something? So, we're buying gloves, we're buying disinfectant, we're buying masks, we're buying just anything and everything, right? The CDC. We did the same thing you did. The only thing we didn't do is we didn't buy more toilet paper. I promise you, we did not buy any toilet paper, more toilet paper. We didn't feel like we needed to stock up on that. We did stock up on rags and towels, but so in the child nutrition, I want to just back up just a little bit. We shored up our child nutrition program. We went a full quarter, 3 months, right, where they didn't have any customers. They were pushing meals out, but right, there was nothing in place to get paid for that. Had we not used that first round of CARES money to shore up our food service department, we would have ended up about $1.6 million in our food service fund. There's only one way to repair that without CARES money, and that's to do a transfer either out of the general fund or the LOB. So it's got to come out of our operating money. So that would not have been good. Something definitely the deputy superintendent and I talked about probably on a weekly basis. Where are we at? What's the USDA? What's the feds doing to help us shore up our child nutrition programs? And they've done a lot of things since, but that's why clearly over a third of those initial dollars went to fund our child nutrition program. And we were trying to do creative things. You saw we were running around town with buses. We had feeding sites everywhere. Some of you probably worked at some of them. So, and we appreciate that. Thank you. That is CARES Act Easter 1. And alongside that, we got some SPED dollars, CARES Easter 1 SPED. You can see we've done very similar things, 60% distance learning, 24% PPE, 16% disinfecting. But this money, again, has to be really targeted to, our children with the IEP. So we bought special clear masks. We got, different things for that group. But that, again, is how those dollars lined out. Towards the end of May, we were told about our CRF Sparks money. We did not get that money until September 17th. The award date on that money was September 17th. We had until December 30 to spend that $3.2 million. And that's not an easy thing to do in 3 months and do it well. And I think we really did it well, based again on what we knew about the pandemic, what reopenings were going to look like. But that was $3.2 million. That was probably more heavily spent in PPE, disinfecting. We had to rewrite all the IEPs early on. That was an additional expense that was allowable. Distance learning and some technology, but the bulk of those dollars, really, half of that money was in the PPE, desk shields, disinfecting, really trying to get our facilities ready to introduce human beings. It's almost crazy to say that, but it was really, our focus was getting our facilities ready to introduce human beings back in and try to have some activity, social distancing, dots, right? All of those kind of things. That money was defeased within the time parameters we were given. We had about 90 days to do that, so we spent that $3.2 million. Parallel to that, our CARES Act broadband partnership through the Kansas Department of Commerce was a $600,000 award, and we utilized that money to pay for internet services for qualifying families. Our partner Cox, the Connect to Compete, and then 81% of that was used to purchase Chromebooks replacement devices. We had the opportunity to secure a fair amount at what ended up being a reasonable prices, because as we got into the fall, that the technology went crazy, right? To buy a Chromebook, we're paying $250 for one, and now they want $500 for one. When we distribute Chromebooks to kids, if we don't see them every day, you can imagine we don't get them all back. So
Well, we have a librarian on our team that will attest to that.
she will attest to that.
She will attest to that.
Yeah, so that allowable expense, certainly reasonable. And that's what we did with that broadband partnership. Again, that money was even had a tighter window than our Sparks money. We were awarded that, you can see, in October, and we had to have that defeased by December 30. I'm not a big fan of getting large chunks of money with small windows because it sometimes, it's hard to spend it well. But I really do want your team and the rest of the folks listening to know there's a great deal of effort and energy, probably not equal to the instruction side, because I know there was a bunch on that side, but there was a great deal of energy expended on the operations side on how do we really do this efficiently and what's best for our people, our human beings that are going to be back in our buildings. That's what we had in mind. And I tell my folks, the next pandemic we'll have a playbook. So we don't have one this time. So
If we have one.
if we had one, so we're going to write one heck of a playbook.
That's right. And I'm going to pause you for a second there, just to make sure, and before we go into ESER 2, that there aren't any questions from anybody on my side of the table. Does anybody have any questions about what Gary has covered so far?
I just have one question. On the 81% one-to-one devices, are some of those shored up? Are some of them put into a supply? So we have extras, so we're able to use those in case, Chromebooks were at, which they will, or they're not returned, or
That's
something is that. Do
Yeah.
we know how much?
Yeah,
is
what
in a-
do we have in reserve?
What do we have in
Is
reserve
really your
of Chromebooks?
question, and that's a question that Mr. Gowan, I can get you that answer. We
Okay.
do have some in reserve.
Okay, so I just noticed in our library, and I don't know all of that, but was just wondering, we have quite a bit of extra or surplus in there, and I was wondering, are we giving out brand new ones? Were we using up? I know some of my kids' Chromebooks were getting to be
Right.
a little raggedy, but still usable. And are we starting out giving them new Chromebooks, or are we still utilizing the old ones?
Yeah, I would let Mr. Gowan answer that question, because I don't know what the strategy is for deployment. From our end, operations end, I can tell you that the procurement strategy was more just to get our arms around them, because their just availability continues to be an absolute problem. Our partner, Two Trees, our Lenovo partner, has been really good working with us if there are some available. Availability is the real problem. Getting them across the big lake. And so we're seeing estimates where there's going to be a tight supply, maybe even a shortage, the next 18 to 24 months.
So did we have like a special, I don't want to say a Kmart special, but is there a special in buying an overabundance of Chromebooks?
Yeah, I can tell you, like everything, there's been upward price pressures, and quantity has not been the driver for discounts. No. What if we buy 2,000 instead of 1,000? $459.
One other question I have is, do the parents absorb the insurance cost? Like if a Chromebook is destroyed or there's partial, it's not returned or things like that, do we have insurance through the district that will give you some of that money back to for another Chromebook?
So we don't insure things that are under $5,000. And we, the technology fee that we collect, which we haven't collected
Right.
in over a year now,
Mhm.
those are dollars we put right back into new screens and trying to repair ones that have been damaged or just normal wear. But the collecting those fees is not easy. And if a student purposefully damages, when we do get those calls, as you can imagine, we meet quite a bit of resistance from parents for replacement costs of those things. So the truth of the matter is, student technology is the lion's share. Outside of a pandemic is a capital outlay expense, and during a pandemic, we're going to make the case as hard as we can that these lost, stolen, damaged, wore out devices. This is a coronavirus problem. We're really going to try to utilize the coronavirus.
So going further, I think this is going to be, I'm not sure, but I don't know if this is our last round of ESSER, but going further then, will the future purchase of Chromebooks come out of capital outlay?
Beyond coronavirus,
Yes.
that's the only place there is for it.
Okay. And do we still, I know we had two last year because of necessity, but are we still looking at one-to-one Chromebooks also in the elementary, and are they allowed to come home? that seems to be where our issue lies, maybe with them going home, not coming back, dog got a hold of them,
Right.
disappeared.
On my bedroom floor.
Exactly. Are we still gonna allow them to take them home? Or you may not know that. I'm just,
I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know that it's been discussed to this point.
Discussed that, when we are in school or in session, we would be resorting to pandemic practice, which is that our Chromebooks are at school.
okay. So we have less distraction.
So,
Obviously.
okay, yeah, so the answer is we get into school and it looks normal, the Chromebooks are gonna be at school, not home.
All right, thank you very much.
Is that fair?
There.
Did anybody else have any questions?
Thank you for that explanation. The Chromebooks are a big deal, but I will say, in response to part of what I put in that letter, there was a large district south of us that had to get Chromebooks into the hands of 50,000 students last August. And so when it comes to pandemic planning, I think we were on point with that one. Maybe not much else, but having the one-to-ones in our kids' hand for the last several years really made a difference. Even though it was difficult to get them out, get them back, get them repaired, we at least had a little bit of an edge in that situation.
Yeah, so, yeah, and moving forward, really the issue, I mean, the price is gonna be the price, right? Supply and demand, there's a supply. They're gonna charge what they can, what market's gonna bear.
And that, as I talked about.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving forward, and not a lot to tell you about CARES ESER 2, CARES ESER 3, our second and third round. Estimates for our CARES ESER $2, about 18.7 million, and our ESER $3, 42 million. The ESER $2, we have until September of 2023 to spend those funds. And our ESER 3 dollars we have through September of 2024. I can tell you, year to date, we've spent about 918,000 of our ESER 2. That's 100% instruction, summer school, and curriculum materials. So we've spent about $1 million already of that. And behind there, again, I'm not going to walk you through the entire document that I shared with you, but I just wanted to pick up some highlights. And I think of interest, maybe the allowable section, what's allowable in that ESER 1, and then again, what's allowable in ESER 2.
Before we move from this
Go ahead.
page, is there any way that we could know the current balance of ESER 2 and 3? You gave us what we have spent, and on the rest of them, the current balance.
So we have spent zero money on ESER 3. We haven't received any ESER 3. We haven't received an award. That's an estimated award. And of the estimated 18.7 million, we've spent, about a little less than $1 million. So essentially, there's 17.8 million set in ESER 2.
So when do we expect ESER 2?
Yeah, you gotta spend them in order. So we have to spend down the 18.7 million before you can even start thinking about spending the 42. So from a financial standpoint, we're really not even talking about spending that 42 yet until we have a solid plan in place for ESER 2. And our strategy is working on, so we have two budget cycles here, the 21, 22, and then into September of 23 to spend those ESER 2. So we will put together a 12 to 18 month spending plan, but really we're going to break those down into quarterly targets, because I think it's going to be a lot easier for us to manage that and do it well. It's what the deputy superintendent was telling me, and it goes back to the what's allowable, but did that answer your question on,
It did,
on the
it did.
ESER 2, ESER
It
3?
just didn't have current balance left, so.
Yeah, current balance in ESER 3 is all of it, because we haven't been awarded in ESER 2. If you look at our ESER 2 fund, it's gonna have a negative balance of that 918,779, because again, these are reimbursements. We spend the money, and then they send us to ACH for what we spend. So-
I do have one other real quick question before we move on. The requested amounts, in ESER 1, the requested amount that you asked for is the amount you got. So these 18.7 and 42.1, are these the amounts that we have requested?
Yeah, and I say requested, but really that is what was requested on our behalf by the Kansas Department. It's not a number driven by anything we've done.
Okay,
Yeah, it really, that number is driven by what each state got,
okay,
and then how the Kansas Department of Education parcels that out per student to the district. So I requested is probably not the best word there, because requested it does not imply that is something that we had anything to do with. It really is the number given to us by the Department of Education.
okay,
That fair?
thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
So the one thing the deputy superintendent wanted me to mention, and I think it's a great thing to say, allowable uses, ESER 1, and then allowable uses, ESER 2 and 3. We're not going to go through those line by line, but you'll see very similar things, but there are different strategies. So ESER 1, the one thing that you have to understand is, the Department of Ed and our friends at the U.S. Department of Ed, federal government, same boat we were, right? Nobody knew what this pandemic was really going to entail early on, how long it was going to last. So those ESER 1 dollars, what they did know though is that they had to get some funds into the public schools for some relief. And they did that. So, the vehicle they used was the title program, something already established. So that was very smart, I think. And ESER 1 really behaves a lot like title, with the one difference in that everything you did had to have some tie back to coronavirus, right? It had to be in response to coronavirus. But beyond that, there was a lot of autonomy for the school district to use those funds in the way they best saw fit. And as you can see, that first go round, that was important for us to keep our food service department intact, our transportation intact. And then we started building out to the facilities things, disinfecting, personal protective equipment. But that really was left to the districts. And then, like all things, we were audited this past year on our initial spend, and in our single audit, and that went well. But things will get trued up in ESER 1 through audits. Essentially, is what I'm telling you. They'll look for allowability issues in audits. So there was no pre-approval for ESER 1 spending. Here's the money, get out there, start solving problems. Okay? ESER 2 is different, and the allowable uses are similar, but they're not identical. ESER 2, you have to get pre-approval from the Kansas Department of Ed. There's a task force, so everybody has to submit their plan. Has to be approved prior to moving forward. And these dollars are really, really, really emphasized. The emphasis is these dollars should be spent on learning loss. We kind of worked on the facility problems. We're currently installing And you'll see things in your building like the water bottle filling stations instead of the little drinking fountains. That's a high-touch surface area, right? Lots of germs can come and go, so we're working on those. We're working on devices that go on our rooftops that help clean the air, as the overall air in a building is being exchanged. These little devices are designed to remove viruses and bacteria. So we're trying to make our air cleaner, right? So we're doing some of those things. But in terms of masks and desk shields and disinfectant, we were hoping we were beyond that. I think probably the folks that had designed the Easter 2 and Easter 3 we're and are hoping that, you know, a minimal amount of money can be spent on that. Although I think it's pretty evident we're still going to need masks, we're still going to need hand sanitizers. We're going to still need to do a lot of disinfecting moving into the school year. But really, the emphasis on these dollars are intended to work with our students to make up that learning loss. That's the focus. You'll see our plan as we build it out, as we get it submitted. Again, we're taking an 18 to 24 month long-term view, but we're really focusing on quarterly increments. And again, a lot of money, and we're trying to do it correctly. So the first round you see with Easter 2, the focus was how do we have a robust summer school, and how do we get the instructional materials that hopefully will help us with some of the learning loss. But that's the strategy for Easter 2 and then Easter 3. So that's what I know about coronavirus and federal relief dollars. And the interesting thing is what we're learning is the difficulty managing these dollars alongside our regular title dollars and our at-risk money, because there's been some changes in law this past year on the at-risk money. Last year we talked a little bit about at-risk and how there was some legislative push, right, to shrink those dollars, and we'll talk a little bit about that again today. But so today, pandemic today, we've spent about $8.8 million in our response. That's a fiscal overview of what we've done. I mean, those are the dollars, right? To put into what did we do? How did we do it in classrooms and videos? That'd be a 12-hour presentation. But in terms of dollars and cents, additional revenue, all these federal dollars, and really about the only additional revenue we've received this past year, additional revenue for the federal dollars, and that is due to coronavirus relief, pandemic relief.
Thank you for clarification. We have had questions within ourselves about the year just blew by.
Yeah.
I don't know how this happened, what happened
Absolutely.
there, or there's no time to question. The children still keep coming. So I appreciate that clarification on how that money was allocated, spent in a variety of different ways. I believe Michelle Kirk has a question real quick. I think this comes out, but whatever.
So in looking at the ESSER 2, the expense so far, $918,779, was 100% instruction summer school. So my question looking forward in that 18 to 24 month view with quarterly reports is, am I hearing that these funds can be used to pay instructors so that perhaps increased teaching staff to minimize class size, especially with the knowledge that COVID is not gone, and that could then enhance concentrated learning loss through increased teaching staff? Is that what I'm hearing?
So the funds can be used on salary and benefits as it is directly related to response to coronavirus. So the answer is the allowability depends on our our ability to write our ask for the task force and convince them that this is entirely additional steps, certainly in response to, would be an allowable expense. Yeah.
Again, thank you for that,
And I want
information.
to just make sure you understand, right? When we craft these requests, it has to be in response to coronavirus, and it has to be above and beyond what you were doing in your job prior to, right? We can't use this money for things we were doing in FY 2020 from July to February. Does that make sense? It has to be above and beyond, and it has to tie back to coronavirus.
Lucinda, do we know how many students
Did that help?
attended that robust summer learning
Good.
program? Do we know how many students that attended?
Not sure if you have this information, but you might. Do we know how many students actually attended summer school? Oh, Billy's shaking his head.
Billy?
Okay, so we had 625 students who participated in the summer enrichment and academic, which was PK8. We had 43 students who participated in our summer music program, 51 in our Native American summer camp, 72 in our preschool CAP program, and 84 students in our special ed extended summer school, or extended school year. We had the best high school turnout we've ever had. We recovered 417 credits, or 479 classes. We had 113 students at Highland Park, 124 at Topeka High, 143 at Topeka West, 30 students at Hope Street, and 7 students at Cap City, who recovered those 479 classes, 417 students total.
Did we use ESSER funding for ESY? Did we actually use the ESSER funding for ESY?
So yes, in all the district summer programs, that allowed us to pay the teachers at their daily rate, and that included special ed extended school year.
Except for those schools that have the 21st century learning programs happening, correct?
Correct, those were individual awards to those schools, and those maintained our negotiated rate of pay.
Those funds are also used to pay for transportation also.
Okay, just one last real quick question. Jeremy just wanted to know from you, Billy, if that was the slide that you shared at the last board. Okay.
That's what you said, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to your the next very interesting thing, revenue neutral. This will really be amazing for you. Yeah, let's look at that. It's the board item. And the reason I want to talk to you about that a little bit is it doesn't make sense to move forward into the broader topic of what aggregately our budget's doing, what it's done, what it's doing, what looks like it's going to do the next couple of years without this, without some discussion around revenue neutral rate. I don't know whether any of you were tracking. We passed a resolution on the July for, to allow us to exceed revenue neutral. And we're going to talk about it here in depth. But essentially, the legislative body this past year passed a statute that said taxing entities could not exceed a revenue neutral rate. And a revenue neutral rate really is the mill levy. Essentially what it means is you can't pass a mill levy for any upcoming budgets that allow you to collect more taxes than you did before, the year before, without another notification to your constituents, okay? So it's just another layer of the process, and this has done a lot of things. It's extended the budget cycle for us by about 30 days. For me, I think the idea behind the legislation was with assessed valuations increasing, and these taxing entities are keeping their mill levies flat, or they lower them a little bit, and they say, hey, we lowered your mill levy, but they still collect more taxes because your assessed valuations went up, right? So shame on them for funding their budgets. And this almost to me is, like we're doing something sleight of hand. But, we do the same things year after year, over and over, public meetings. We publish our budget. It has to be published 10 days prior to any adopted hearing before our board adopts it. So it is a very public process. But essentially, what this law did was all county clerks had to establish this revenue neutral rate, this mill levy, based on estimated valuations that wouldn't allow the entity to collect more in local taxes than they did the year before without publishing another notice to its constituents. So with that said, board item here, the key things really to look at are about the middle of the page. So for 2021, our final mill levy was 49.716 mills, okay? 20 mills in the general fund, right? That's everybody levies 20 mills. Keep that in mind because that's going to get really important as we go down in this discussion. So the calculated R&R from our county was 47.723 mills. That's a decrease of 1.99 mills, okay? So our proposed, with our proposed 2022 budget, we're proposing a 1.7 mill decrease, or 48.03. So we're going to exceed what the county calculated as our revenue neutral rate. Again, keep in mind, these are based on estimated assessed valuations, and that's important. So, is there any questions on that board item? You could go back and look at these, right? They're public information, but essentially, those are the important things I want you thinking about. We levied 20 mills in the general fund because you have to by statute. The revenue neutral rate law, right? It says you can't, based on estimated valuations, you can't set a mill levy at a rate that would allow you to collect more taxes in the upcoming year than you did the year before without saying, hey, taxpayers, we're doing this, okay? That's what this is all about. So if you look at the second page, this is exactly what we got from the county. You can see what we collected in actual taxes. You can see what our actual mill levy was. The general fund 20 mills, our capital outlay was at 7.7 mills. Supplemental general 16.6 mills. The special liability expense fund 1.26 mills, and our bond and interest at 4. Okay, so that was 49.716. The calculated revenue neutral rate, 47.723. You can see the general fund is down almost a mill levy. You see that in the calculated? And then our calculated capital outlay at 7.48. These are based on assessed valuations. In our case, are estimated to be 5% higher in this next cycle. So let's keep that in mind, 5%. And then the balance, another 21.19 mils. So we had 47.723 to work with. Now, here's the interesting thing. In this memo, you're seeing the exact same memo our board members saw. Okay, let's go to that. We're going a little deeper into that. And we're going to talk about mill levies, what funds you could levy them on, what do they do for us. But the law includes the general fund, right? So we have to levy 20 mils in our general fund, but SB 13 contradicts the state finance law. So every school district in the state got a notice from your county clerks that said, hey, we're going to lower your mill levy for the general fund. But they can't do that because the state finance law says everybody's going to levy 20 mils. So the county, the revenue neutral rate was 1.9 mils lower than our mill levy for 2021. But 1 mil of that was the general fund. We can't do anything about that. We're going to levy 20 mils. The school finance law trumps this, and I promise you, every school district in the state is levying 20 mils, not 19, not a middle less than before. So already there, we're almost in a situation where we got to do a resolution anyway, just with the general fund, and we have no choice. We're gonna levy 20 mils. Does that make sense? So we're already at the point really where we're gonna do this resolution just from the general fund. But so what funds, in this specific to Pekin Public Schools, what funds are impacted by the revenue neutral rate? Well, about 80% of our funds are impacted by this because the overall driver is the general fund and the LOB, okay? So the general fund, the LOB, code 6, code 8, that's where we get our operating dollars for teachers, for us, for custodians. That's where we get our operating dollars, okay? General fund, LOB. So there are 19 funds schools can do a local levy for. We do 5. Everybody does a general fund. If you're a USD in the state of Kansas, you do 20 mils. You don't have a choice. We levy 20 mils in the general fund. We have a supplemental general, LOB levy. We levy for capital outlay. We levy for special liability, and we levy for bond and interest. Again, what does the general fund and the LOB do? They are for our operating expenses, salaries, benefits, utilities, supplies. Make sense? What do we do with that money? What do we do with the capital outlay? We make sure the air conditioning is working. We put roofs on the building. We buy equipment. We buy, outside of the pandemic, we buy computers, we buy chairs, we buy tables, we buy lawnmowers, we buy vans to come out and fix your sink. Those dollars are used for the repair, construction, remodeling, technology. All of our technology coming out of that capital outlay. Bond and interest, simply that. We levy mill to make our principal and interest payments. We'll talk a little bit about our bond debt and our principal and interest that we, from the 2014 bond, general obligation bond, $143 million, which is just wrapping up. The last project was at Clinton Heights Learning Center, the storm shelter there. So we're wrapping up that $143 million, but we have to pay for all the great things that we did with that $143 million over the next 20 plus years. Some things that we have done, just side note, we have refinanced already about 90% of that $143 million in debt at lower rates, so which helps us, and we'll talk just briefly about that when we get to bond and interest. But the general fund used to pay salaries, benefits, utilities, supplies, but also we transfer out of the general fund about 42% of our dollars In FY '21, that was about 42.9 or $43 million to special education, at-risk, 4-year-old at-risk, bilingual, career tech ed, virtual, and professional development. So we got to use our general fund monies, right, based on our foundation aid and our weightings to support those other programs. Okay? The LOB is used in conjunction with your general fund, right? It's the local mill that you use to enhance your general fund state aid. And we do the same things with our LOB, and a higher portion. You see, we transfer a lot out of our LOB. About 81% of our LOB dollars are transferred out to support special ed, at-risk, 4-year-old at-risk, bilingual, career tech ed. The exact same programmatically things we do across the district. Those two funds support our salaries and benefits, the things we do day-to-day operational. Okay, 20 mills we levy in the general fund. We have to do it. We can't levy 19. We're not going to levy 19. We're going to levy 20. With a budget document, we'll let you levy 19. We're going to levy 20. The LOB, we're going to maximize our LOB. And the LOB, you can levy a percentage of your legal max general fund. So across the state, districts can levy between 30 and 33% of their general fund in their LOB. So Topeka Public Schools in 2015 passed another resolution, actually got voted on community-wide, that allows us to levy 33%. So we can leverage the LOB at the highest rate possible. So our proposed LOB rate this year is 15.802, and that is a decrease of about 0.83, a little over 3/4 of a mil from last year. And that is the result of a declining general fund and enrollment. We'll talk about that. Capital outlay, again, that mill levy is used for acquisition of property, construction, reconstruction, repairs, remodeling, etc. Our proposed levy there is 8 mills, which is about a little over a $250,000 increase from where we were a year ago. Wrapping up bond money, which we utilized heavily for technology items. That money is gone. We have about $67 million of projects that will need funded over the next 15 years throughout the district that are HVAC, mechanical, roofs. I mean, it's not cosmetic stuff. It's really just core maintenance and repair, floor tile repair, carpet repair. But our facilities friends are estimating about $67 million. And we do about $4.5 million a year. Obviously, you can't get to every project, right, that needs done. So they're ranked by safety and need. But so we can't cut the capital outlay bill levy in half, right, and maintain our buildings. And I think we do maintain facilities here at Topeka Public Schools very well. And maintain very well. Bond and interest fund, again, this year's proposed levies around 4 mills. When we issued the 2014 bonds, the mill levy estimate for the run out of those bonds 30 years was 6.89 mils. As I mentioned earlier, we've done quite a bit of refinancing. About 90% of the original bonds have been refinanced at a lower interest rate. And that's not anything magic that we've done, but the economy, the interest rates, right? If you've had any money sitting in a savings account or CPA, it hasn't done so well. So not great for savers, but really good for borrowers. And we have taken advantage of that, and we have lowered for our taxpayers the dollars by a significant amount of what it's going to take to repay our 2014 debt. That $143 million, and we'll repay it 5 years earlier. Okay.
Okay. Real quick question
Go ahead.
before we move on. from one of the team members. Is the career tech education primarily TCAL and Washburn? Is that money that comes out of the local option budget? I believe you mentioned tech programs.
Yeah, so we get state aid,
Right.
but it flows through the general fund. Yeah, and that's correct. But we do support that activity with the LOB as well.
Okay.
Yeah, the state aid alone would, the state aid alone would support that activity. What we get in state aid for career tech ed wouldn't support what goes on at TCAL. We have to supplement that with LOB. That makes sense?
Yeah.
The other thing, and I'll just point out, you want to know kind of where are we at, just like you folks, right? Where are we at with kids? How are the kids across the county learning different than my kids? How are they learning different across the state? I included some state median and state high averages. You can see that everybody levies 20 mills in the general fund, but the LOB prior year or 2021, we were at 16.64. Our proposed mill levy is a decrease of 0.83 to 15.802. The statewide low is about 4.2 mils. Statewide median is about 16.99 mils. So we're just under that median, and the high is 34.85. And that's driven by assessed valuations. You have high property values, right? It takes fewer mills to collect the same amount of dollars. So some things that here, I think we're pretty average probably in assessed valuation. What we're not average in, I think, is the amount of property in our district that is not being taxed. There's a lot of property that are neighborhood revitalization or incremental tax incremental financing, and it ends up being about $1.9 million a year of revenue that doesn't flow to the district because of those tax incentives for the developing projects. But not much we can do about that. Hopefully, right, it builds a stronger community at the end of the day is the argument. That capital outlay, so that the cap is 8 mills. And you can see the median's 8 and the high's 8. So really what that's telling you is most people that levy a capital outlay mill levy at the maximum. And, the reason being technology's not going down. I'm sorry for that. The cost of technology is not going down. The cost to repair your roof is not going down. The cost to put carpet down is not going down. In some instances, if we can find people to do it, it's a challenge for us as well. Bond and interest, as mentioned, we're going to be at 4.05. We were at 4.092 in 21. The state median is 11, so we're way under the median in terms of our debt payments. State high is 28.72. So just to give you kind of an idea there. Special liability fund, we're going to turn the corner, and that is the final fund we levy a mill. So general fund, LOB, capital outlay, bond and interest, and for us, the special liability fund. And that is just providing for the defense of the school district courts employees. So this past year, we had about a 1.2 mil. We had some claims experiences, some adverse expenditures in 2020, which left us in a bad cash position in that fund. So we raised that mill levy up a little bit for FY21. We kind of got things shored up. I don't know whether the pandemic, people just not being in our buildings probably helped us. It did at work comp. We certainly didn't have nearly the work comp injuries. But we're able to reduce that special liability mill levy back to about 0.25%. How do we compare in terms of mill levies and residential property here in the district? Annual assessed valuation Keep in mind that the first $20,000 of property is exempt from the 20 mils. So this is a property that's within about 5 or 6 blocks of Topeka Public Schools. It happens to be mine, so I know it's accurate. It's right off the tax statements. So 2016 appraised value of $112,000 appraised that can be taxed. 2021 appraised value of $129,000. So valuation increase of 15.9%. You can see the 2015 taxes were $608 on that property. In 2020, they were $675. That's a $67 increase in 5 years. It's about $13 annually average. You can see our mill levy at that same time went from 51.72 down to 49.716, with a proposed for 22, 48.03. And my point there is, on an average property, our mill levy, I think, has been very fair. And we've worked really hard at keeping it fair and still funding the programs in the district at a level that we think we need to fund it at. But externally, we have an audience, right? That holds our feet to the fire on the dollars we can raise and spend. If you look statewide, mill levy 5-year average, you can see Topeka Public Schools has had a continuous decline. 2016-17, 15.869, down to 2021 of 49.712, essentially, with a proposed this year of 48.03. I think comparatively, if you look at the medians, we're always a little bit below that median, and we're nowhere near the high. 5-year comparison among our peers here in Cheyenne County, I think holds about the same as statewide. You can see we're all in that 50 to 55 mil range. This year we'll dip below that. We're at 49.72 in 21, 48, a little over 48 mils for 2022. You can see that we have managed our mill levies at just slightly lower than our peers, except for 1 year. They're among the other 4. So to me, again, I think in a comparison, I think that we try to be very fair to our taxpayer, and at the same time fund the district at a level that we feel is appropriate. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, this revenue neutral business, what has it done from my calendar? It's really extended it. Whether that's good or bad, it's added discussion at a board meeting that I think is just discussion. I don't know that this revenue neutral rate is super helpful for our taxpayers based on what I've kind of pointed out to you. We've been working the last 5 years very hard to be fair. But normally we have our budget hearings with Kansas Department of Ed scheduled early in August. We have on the first meeting in August, our request for our board to allow us to publish our Code 99, which by fund tells our community what we're going to levy in terms of bills in the general fund, the MOB, capital outlay, special liability, in those 5 funds. But this year, because of this revenue neutral business, you cannot hold a budget hearing until after August 20th. Normally, by August 25th, we're done. We've submitted our budget to Kansas Department of Ed. We've certified it with the county. But SB 13 extends that period out. So our request to the board to schedule our budget hearing, we'll put our request to publish in the paper on the August 19th board agenda, and then we'll come back in that first meeting in September and have our hearing. Because by statute, you can't have a public hearing on your budget until after August 20th. It has to be between August 20th and September 20th. So it's changed the calendar a little bit. And it really, it's inconvenient because it really extends about 30 days what we publish internally to our budget managers or principals for the dollars they have to work with. But that is the nature of the beast, and we'll comply with that. The last things I want to talk a little bit about here in revenue neutral, and I started this off by saying this revenue neutral rate is calculated on estimated assessed valuations, okay? And this is a assessed valuation state aid. You could ignore state aid because that's a state aid on bond and interest, but focused on assessed valuation. Our assessed valuation on that RNR are about 5%, okay? So our revenue neutral rate is based on an assessed valuation for the upcoming year that's 5% higher. And if you look, starting in 2021, and this goes back to 2005, 2006, do you see in any of those periods a 5% assessed valuation? Because I don't. Because there's not one. There's some negatives. So over the last 10 years, our assessed valuation in Shawnee County has been averaged about 9.4. Last 5 years, 1.5. Last 3, 1.74. So we've really seen that growth, right, in the last 3 years. And the 5% in the upcoming year, I think, is really that's really optimistic in a community that has never seen 5%. And I know, I mean, I'm like you. I know I have friends. I hear stories, right, about what people are paying for property. I hear people that are so frustrated when they go to look at a house, right? You think you're the first one there and it's already sold, and the person that meets you at the door pay $45,000 over the list price. And so you know, my strategy in terms of setting our mill levies and our estimating what we're going to collect in that revenue, my optimism isn't as high as I think maybe others, because I really think these property values are a temporary thing, particularly in Shawnee County. So we're being very conservative with our revenue estimates based on mill levies and taxes collected, because I really do believe that the 5% assessed valuation increase, which good for homeowners, good for property owners. I love that, but I'm really challenged to think that's going to stick over the long haul, and even within the next 18 to 22 months. But that's my opinion. And then just the overall mill levy history, again in the same time frame from 2004-05 down to 2021, you can see that we've really worked pretty hard in that period. Particularly coming out of that block grant situation, 14, 15, 16, 17, 15, 16, 16, 17, that was the block grant years. Coming out of that block grant cycle into the state finance formula, we've really tried to maintain our mill levy at a really steady rate or just a little lower every year. To be fair to our taxpayers, but at the same time, trying to fund the school district. That is R&R. And do you have kind of a sense on how these kind of laws impact school finance? Because particularly that general fund and that LOB, right? Big hunks of those dollars are salary benefits. That's our operating cash. And so, essentially that law is saying, without preventing you, it is saying, we don't want you collecting more taxes, irregardless of what's going on in your budget, irregardless of teacher negotiations, or you got a $500,000 gas bill in February.
I wondered about that.
Well, stop wondering. It was about $512,000.
Wow.
Okay? You understand what I'm trying to convey to you there with that is so there's pressures both ways, right? You know, our community, right? Nobody wants to see their taxes increase by 15% just to fund your gas bill. But we have to thread that needle. We have to thread that needle. And this year it's a needle for us. But is anybody revenue neutral? It's a terrible subject. I wish I wouldn't even have to talk about it today. But I don't pass laws. I follow them. Unfortunately, I don't pass them. So run for state representatives, run for Senate. We need some more friends in
We need more
education.
educators on the.
Yeah.
Sitting up there. Does anybody have any questions about this piece that Gary has covered?
Do we know how much money this is? When he says the
Do we
decrease
know
of
how much money?
1.7
49
mil levy decreases, what is the total money we're talking?
total dollar amount?
Yeah, so a mill levy for us is around $650,000. Between 650 and 700,000, depending on your assessed valuation estimate, plus or minus 5%. And I'm not being coy, but it really is. These estimated assessed valuations are interesting. I mean, I get properties going up. I just don't know how long it's going to stay there.
Right.
But bottom line, 650, 700,000 bucks per mill. That makes sense?
So just over $1 million. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that clear?
And are we applying for a resolution to exceed? Is that?
We actually passed. We brought a request to our board on the second meeting in July for the very reason when you get to the general fund, right? I just want to emphasize our revenue neutral rate as calculated by the county was 19 mills. We're going to levy 20. There's a mill right there. We got no say so in that. State finance formula says you're going to levy 20 to pay for all this state aid. The court is going to make us do.
So you've got two bills there that are in conflict. One that says you have to pay 20 and another one that says, wait.
We're going to pay 20, yeah.
You can only take 19. So, I guess that I watch the state legislature as close as I can. I need to watch this one now. One more thing, but.
So, at the budget finance workshop, I do think that my understanding was with the revenue neutral rate, they kind of bounced back and forth. Initially, the initial discussion schools were in, and because of the 20 mil, and some other things that schools were pulled out, and it didn't make sense to apply this to schools. It was just going to be your municipalities and counties. But then everything got pushed into that, the big omnibus bill that they wrap everything up into to get things done, and schools were put back in. And I'd be honest with you, from our standpoint, it is part of the process now. I think this law, if it stays, it's just part of the process. Now your Code 99 includes this revenue neutral information. I think it just becomes part of the process. Some of the folks at the Kansas Department of Ed finance team think, they're pretty sure this will get revisited because they've got a correct language to make the general fund make sense. You can't, right, say you got to levy 20 mills and then every, county clerk does the calculation like they're supposed to, right, and, shows a reduced mill levy. So there's a lot of thought that it'll get revisited and that'll get corrected, but probably schools will remain in this. So I think it's just part of the process. I tell you that the folks I feel really sorry for, and at the budget finance workshop here in Northeast Kansas, there was more than a handful of school districts. What gets really complicated is when your district crosses county boundaries into two counties. 3 counties. We had one that had 4. Could you imagine? You had 4 resolutions, 4 different revenue neutral rate calculations. Yeah, so that it gets really squirrely.
If this bill stays in place, does the resolution have to be passed every year?
I believe it does. My understanding of the law is that, yeah, you can't pass like we did for the capital outlay into perpetuity. It has to be done every year. Yeah.
So with the August 19 board agenda covering the revenue neutral rate, and then waiting until after August 20th for that to be approved by the board, does that push back any kind of expenditures in preparation for the school year that starts August 4th?
No, if you have access to your budget, right, if you're a budget manager, you're gonna see where those, in our current system, we allow you to drive those accounts negative, right? Yeah, we don't stop. The school district don't stop. It doesn't stop expenditures, it doesn't stop anything other than once we publish and we adopt internally, Shawnette, our budget and grant manager, once she uploads that, it'll magically repair those negative account balances. We hope in most instances. Sometimes we have to go in and adjust it, but no, that does not. And great question, does this extended adoption period mean we can't spend money until then? No, it doesn't mean that.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right, so that gets us to the final table, and it is foundation aid, and it's got some dates starting right to left from 15 back to 23, okay? And like always, and I think I shared this last year, these things make a lot of sense to me, but me, you know, I put them in the order that I think they make sense to me, but we're gonna talk about each line, and then the columns really are representative of fiscal years, okay? Can we start there? Does everybody agree to that?
Yes.
So, and you can see at a very, very tippy top row, right? We got FY23, FY22, 21, 2019. So FY23 is a guess. We're not gonna spend a lot of time on guesses. FY22's budget, we're gonna spend some time on that. That's important. And then FY21, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, those are actuals, okay? Those columns, those are actual numbers. So foundation aid per student. And I wrote in per student, I hope, on everybody's. When I talk about foundation state aid, again, and you know, I work with this every day, like the things you work with, and I left out per student, so I want you to know that's important. So FY15, 16, 17, $3,852. That was a block grant, right? So weightings didn't matter, the number of kids didn't matter, so that's why there's a bunch of blanks there when you see kids in weightings. Because it didn't matter. Under the block grant, what you got the year before is what you got the next year. That's what you work with, right? So there was zero increases in state aid during that period. And then we went through, you know, the lawsuits and things got kind of shook out. We're not going to talk about that, but you can see based on what was settled, FY18 we went from 3852 to 4006 per student. FY19 to 4165. FY20, 4436, 21, 4569. This budget cycle, we're at 4706. And then in 2023, we go to 4826. And that is the final year the state finance law addresses. In 2024, it goes to the consumer price index. any increase or decrease of state aid is pegged to the CPI by the statute. Okay, so there were 0% increases during the block grant. From FY 17 to 18, there was about a 4% increase from 3852 to 4006. From 18 to 19, there was about a 4%, 3.97 to the 4165. 19 to 20, about a 6.5% in per student state aid to the 4436. This past year, 4569 from the 4436, about a 3%. And then it flattens out there, 3% over that time period.
Why was there such a big jump in 20? I feel like I should remember that. But
Yeah, that really was, I think, the 19 and 20 coming out of the finance formula was the equalization, because remember, you've got telepathy, because I was just looking, right? Because the 3852, the 4006, we weren't even back to 2008.
numbers.
Yeah, what they really wanted to do with that funding was front load it and then level it out. So they really wanted to catch up those first 2 years, because the 3852, so the high water mark was 4,400 in 09. Now, keep in mind in 09, that 4,400 didn't stick. Remember, they went backwards when we got into the Great Recession mid-year.
Right.
But we didn't hit 2009 per student FTE until 2020. Okay?
Okay.
So does that make sense? And they wanted to front end load that a little bit, because we're just making up ground from where we were in 2009, and then they tapered it off at those 3% points.
Okay.
FTE per student, okay? But you gotta have the students, and that's what's important. So the 18, 19, 20, 21 numbers are audited. The 22 numbers are estimates again, 23s are guesses. But you can see adjusted FTE starting in FY 18, moving right to left, 13.354 or 355. Also, and I, as a reminder for everybody, particularly old timers, some of you may be too young, but us old timers, right? When kindergartners only counted as half, right? There's no such thing as half a kindergartner, but we only got funded for half of them.
Right.
Up until 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, FY 18, they started funding kindergartners at one. One kindergarten, one belly button is one. Not a half. So 13,252 in 19, 12,976.9 in 20, FY 21, 12.7. This is what our foundation aid is being calculated on, right? You see the trend, we're heading down. This year we're at 12,475 is what our foundation aid is going to be calculated on. Based on numbers, again, these are guesses out into that 23 period. We're looking at another loss of students. And what does that do to weighting? So when your actual head counts, your FTEs are declining, right? It has an impact on those weightings. And what do we get weightings for? And these flow into the general fund. We get weightings for 4-year-old at-risk kids. We get weightings for low-high enrollment. We get weightings for bilingual. We get weightings for career tech ed. We talked a little bit about that. Flows into the, through the general fund. We transfer out of the general fund LOB to make these programs work above and beyond our regular instruction that we have to use our general fund and LOB for. High density at risk. Still part of the school finance formula. I mentioned last year, this looked like it was on the chopping block. Again, there was discussion this year that There's some strong support legislatively to let that sunset. There will be a legislative post-audit on what schools have done with their at-risk dollars. They really do not like you spending that on salary and benefits, which is really interesting because we're a people business. This is what we spend it on, right? But there's some folks that think we don't need that high density at risk. That's about $3.8 million to Topeka Public Schools. That would leave a devastating hole in our budget if they sunset that. Okay. New facility weighting. You can see we got a little bit of that, largely due to the classroom spaces we built with our bond funds. But for the most part, that is gone now. Weighted transportation for our kids that we provide home to school, school to home transportation. Weighted special ed and our CAMS, which is the math science program out at Fort Hays State, which we usually have 1 or 2 kids a year. But the bulk of our dollars come from that foundation aid, and then our special education weightings, our at-risk rate weightings, our bilingual weightings. But you could see if you migrate below the line, you can see in FY18 total weightings 24,110, FY19 23,717, 20 22,984, 21 22,890, almost, or 289, almost 290. Estimated for our budget 21,885 for 22. But you could see what's happening there. The weightings from 18 to 19, we lost 393.6, actually 228 head count. From 19 to 20, that was 733 in weightings, 156 in actual head count. 21, 694, 565 head count, 404 estimated, 22 in weightings, with anticipating about a little over 211 decrease in students September 2021. So in a 5-year period, weightings about 2,751 FTE, and actual students in a 4-year period from 18 to 21. I'm just using audited because I hate talking about anything that's not audited for actual kids. 1,160 kids from 18 through 21 audited. Okay. I included, again, just as a comparison, are they disappearing to other schools here in Shawnee County? I can't see evidence of that in our public schools necessarily. Most of them are maintaining at best. Shawnee Heights saw a little bit of growth. But what it really does impact when you have a school finance formula and it is driven by kids, kids are important, and the state's own system and kids count, and they count a lot. So the last 3 rows really are representative of what our general fund state aid has been actual, what some estimates are. Our LOB, which is driven by our general fund, right? So the larger our general fund budget, the larger our LOB budget can be. And you'll see working right to left that LOB budget has been shrinking, but it's following the trend of our student enrollment. And then finally, our SPED numbers in terms of actual dollars. That population within our aggregate population seems to be either stabilized or maybe growth there. And state aid in that special ed category particularly this year, our state, special ed state aid was just even a little stronger than what they budgeted for. And mainly because, right, they take the big bucket of money for sped, divide it up by the amount of teachers in the state. There were just simply fewer folks doing that work this past year. So our sped state aid remained pretty good. That you can see that our increases in general fund state aid and certainly our LOB state aid aren't enjoying the increases of our foundation aid per student, right? 4%, 6.5, 3. Our actual general fund state aid coming out of 19 to 20, our general fund state aid, we saw about a 4.4% increase there, right? But the foundation aid per student was 6.5, moving from 20 to 21, another 3% increase in foundation aid per student. We actually lost about 0.5% in general fund state aid from 20 to 21. I would anticipate what you're looking at there for our budgeted FY22 is a little stronger number than our actual 21. We always budget a little more optimistically because if you don't, you run the risk of having to republish if your enrollment happens to be a little stronger than anticipated. So we always budget that up a little bit. Just trying to prevent going back and having to do the process, publicly again in a board meeting and reposting in the Capital Journal our budget mid-year. So we budget a little strong to try to prevent any republishing. So I would say if we can come in FY22 with a 0.75% to a 1.5% decline in general fund state aid from FY21, I'll probably feel pretty good about that based on estimated enrollment numbers. We're right in the middle of enrollment, so I don't have any enrollment updates in terms of what actual numbers are.
And I have a quick question for you, just FY21, the head count, 565, was that just, do you feel like that was related to the pandemic communication? I mean, when we did our head counts last September, we were a mess. I mean, maybe those kids are there and we just didn't,
Yeah.
Not that you can count them, obviously, when you're turning in documents to the state, but I just look at the numbers, 228, 156, 211, and then of course last year when we weren't in the buildings, 565.
Yeah, unfortunately, listen, if I go back and actually, and I didn't include FY15, 16, 17 enrollment, right, because it didn't matter.
No.
It really, the trend is down. For me to say that even a significant portion of that was pandemic related, I don't know that I can say that. I'd like to say that. I'd like to be honest with you. I'd love to say that. I'd love to say, I'll tell you that this year, those, 400 of those kids are going to show
missing
back.
children reappear.
I can't. Honest, I can't look at you and be serious and tell you that's going to happen. I can look at you and be serious and tell you we're anticipating really losing another 211. Okay.
Maybe they had a question.
My question is, with the number of children lost, doesn't that include a lot, you're looking at how much money we're bringing in, but aren't we also, on the other end of the coin, aren't we losing teachers and benefits? I mean, seriously, other than for this year, next year, I don't see my classroom going down to
I mean, we did the micro classrooms, which was great, but we used everyone in our building. But this year, we're going down to 3-track, which means we've lost teachers or they had to go involuntarily to other classrooms. And then, that's less money that you're spending out. And then, what I hear, there's a teacher shortage. And when you go to hire teachers, there are none to be hired. So we're going to long-term subs until I have a student teacher this year. And once I get that student teacher trained, they will be at half year going into a classroom. So there's several classrooms that are that way. That's kind of been our 501 norm, which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, our student teachers, we train them well, and then they go into the system. But you are having quite a bit of cost reduced by not hiring a teacher for that, hiring a long-term sub. And I'm just wondering, how many teachers have we lost and we are not hiring? Because that's a pretty big amount.
Yeah. We have lost teachers, but the question is, when you look at the decline in enrollment, has there been a corresponding, an equal corresponding loss in staff? So that basically, as a district, we have right-sized our staffing to coincide with the drop in enrollment? And the answer to that question is no, we have not achieved that point. Because when you look at the lost revenue, one of the things that we do to make sure that we are compensating accordingly is whatever that revenue loss is, we look at what that equates to in terms of staffing in order to offset that. And we have not achieved those numbers. When this sheet that Gary is looking at, you notice he stopped and didn't have any calculations for FY23. For both FY23 and FY24, we are projected to have each one of those years an additional over 200 student drop in enrollment.
And so you're saying we're not compensating for that by letting teachers go, or not hiring?
No, well, I'm saying that we are not totally compensating. You are right when you say that staff has declined also during that same period. I guess what I'm saying is that decline in staff has not equaled what we needed it to in order to offset the loss in revenue as a result of the decline in student enrollment.
So how many positions do we have open right now?
Right now, we have about 30 positions that are open.
Okay. And so we do make that up, we do make more money up when we hire long-term subs because we can't get someone to come in. I mean, that's significantly less than paying for a teacher. And then you're taking a student teacher, training them, and then putting them in that position. You think money is made there. I think that's what I'm saying is do you know the ratio of how many students you lose and then a teacher loss, what that comes out to be?
No, I mean, I don't have that number at hand. I can tell you that when it comes to the substitutes, you're right, we're going to pay a substitute less than we would a full-time teacher. But a substitute is pretty iffy because a substitute has the right to either you can say yes or no on a daily basis. Whenever you have a long-term or a contract sub, because you know that you have a a semester or a year absence that you're trying to cover, then, you're going to end up paying a contract's benefits, possibly. That's the situation that you end up with the student teachers that you just mentioned when they join us half year. So you are right in that there are some savings associated with not having a full-time teacher in a classroom that has to be filled by a substitute. You are right. The only point that I'm making is that for the loss of revenue that you have because of the declining in student enrollment, that savings does not equal what we are experiencing in terms of the total lost revenue that we see coming from the loss of student enrollment.
What is that amount per student?
Pardon?
What is that amount per student?
What is the amount per student?
Yeah, what's our lost revenue with each student that we lose in the head count?
And her question is, what is the loss per student? Like we've got a reduction here of 211 for this year. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
So what's the cost per student?
Multiply that times, the opportunity cost is times $4,706.
And that's assuming it's not a special education student.
That is
Right.
foundation aid, folks,
Right.
right? So if that's a special needs student, that just went up.
Right.
So the opportunity cost is high.
Do you
It's
know-
real high.
Just
No, that's what we're saying. I mean, that's just the foundation aid. Take that number times 4,706, and you're gonna get an opportunity cost, right? That's gonna be whatever it is, a little over. Yeah,
192,000, but we
Yeah.
just don't know how many teachers we're losing with that 211.
right.
I mean,
because the 211 is an estimate
right.
at this point, the numbers we have from
Well,
previous years.
you're talking 822,
Right.
roughly.
Well, and that was going to be my next question. When we look at loss in student population, do you know or could you guess whether it's primarily elementary, secondary, or where does it fall for the most part? There's a difference in teacher cost.
Of the 211 that we are projecting in loss enrollment for FY '22, we expect for 155 of that 211 to occur at the elementary level.
With us going to food shop. It was like 7 to 55,
67 teachers.
7, yeah.
But just keep in mind that Gary said that the number that you're working with, that's just foundation aid. You have to add to that, but you're also losing in weightings.
Exactly.
And what we expect that to be, if you add those two numbers together, we're looking at probably about a 1.9, close to $2 million loss in revenue.
Any other questions from this side? Okay.
All right, I think for, they say that the mind can only absorb what the body can endure. So I'm gonna leave you to that. I know we've covered a lot of ground. Almost $8.9 million in coronavirus relief money. I've walked you through some new legislation, revenue neutral. I've given you a history lesson, foundation aid, student enrollment history, and tried my best to tie that back to what it means in finances for the district. And bottom line, in a school finance formula, where the primary calculation is the number of students and the type of students. I agree, right? I like the formula. I just don't like that we're going backwards. It's making it incrementally tougher every year for us to manage our costs. And you're right, less kids has got to mean less teachers, but it's nowhere near incremental. And I think that's what the deputy superintendent was trying to convey is we can't offload cost as fast as we're losing revenue or the opportunity for revenue. Does that make sense? The rate is a lot higher in terms of the amount of students we're losing. And then, right, every year, I mean, with your calculation, and I know we're not at that point, but I mean, just with the number of staff we've got, right? Step increase, $500 just for certified is $500,000. Whether I get more money or less money, I'm getting less money. But step increase is $500,000. I mean, somebody's got to crack that nut within the budget. And we're a people business. And I said this last year, we're a people business. But in any business, you don't have increasing revenues. You manage your business by managing costs. There's no magic. I'm not a genius, right? I'm no Jeff Bezos. I don't have any rockets that I'm going to launch. But you get less revenue, you got to manage your costs. Unfortunately, we're a business. We're people. And those are the costs we have to manage. We try real hard managing our variable costs like utilities, those things. But as we experienced, this last year, even sometimes that gets out of control. And there's litigation pending, by the way, I should say, on February, still pending litigation. Something LR's going to talk about health insurance, right? And I'm not going to get deep into health insurance, but if insurance is at the front or the back of a sentence, costs have went up. Our property liability costs. You look at what's going on the West Coast. If it's not burning up, it's underwater, and it impacts what we pay to protect our buildings. If you go back, and I certainly share what our property liability costs, 14, 15 during the block grant, a little over $500,000, kind of started migrating up. This year's general liability for property and liability to protect you as employees and me as an employee is right at $1.2 million. Health insurance, and LR had mentioned that health insurance is one of the toughest years he's ever been at the negotiating table. And I agree with it. And I can't imagine having anybody but him as our advocate. He is working harder than you can imagine. But I can share with you from April of 20 through March of 21, our claims experience, we had 6 months where our claims were higher than the premiums we paid our insurance company, right? So claims exceeded their revenue for half of their year with us, and not by $30. We're by 148%.
I think we could probably, I certainly understand that. And I
Yeah.
certainly get the taxes, I get the claims because as the small person, as things roll downhill, hits us as well.
Yeah.
I mean, our property taxes have gone up.
Yeah.
Our health insurance has gone up. What we paid out has gone up. Our taxes are going up. I mean, it all just kind of levels out. And that's, you know, we understand where you're coming from, but we're on the low end of the scale, and that's where we're coming from.
Sure.
So, thank you.
One last question, and I just kind of write things down to see if they come up. Our buildings were empty for a lot of the years last year, you know, they were just empty. Was there an extra expense incurred there, or was it an opportunity for savings? I don't even want to say that word opportunity, because we certainly don't want our buildings to be empty. But they were. I mean, we all know that they sat for weeks at a time with maybe 10 people inside of the building. But yet those operating expenses continued. And then, of course, the electric, the gas bill, the gas expense that hit everybody. But I was just curious about the buildings themselves, maintaining and keeping them as active, functioning buildings. Could ESSER funds have paid for any of that? Did it? What happened there? This is just me being curious, I think.
So anything that would have been related to coronavirus, right, could have been paid for with those dollars. So all of the extra disinfecting that you see, you know, the things that were related to the pandemic, but just the lights being on, right? We had lights on in 2019, so we had gas in 2019. We fixed windows and doors in 2019, so no. Unless there was a direct correlation to coronavirus, just the normal operating expense that was paid out of the general fund, the LOB, right?
Okay.
Yep.
And then one last question. You mentioned the cost for claims with the insurance. Did the cost of the claims, I'm going to read this directly, it's from Jeremy, have claims totals increased or number of claims increased? So in other words, did the average cost per claim increase, or did the number of claims, or was it both?
It was probably a combination of both because of the increased cost of healthcare, period. I can tell you that we had, I think it was just recently, it was it a 3-month period that they gave us the cost? It was a 3-month period just recently that I think our claims costs were something like $500,000, which again complicated the calculation for the premium renewal. It complicated it not only for the provider that we currently have, but it complicated it for those who were interested in taking a look and possibly taking over the business. We just have, unfortunately, a employee group that is extremely high cost. It has been for a number of years in comparison to what we're paying in as far as premiums. We have been able to negotiate and offset that disparity in prior years, except for last year where we had a slight increase. But, you know, we have a provider that finally just could not continue to lose money on this account at the rate that they were, and came back with a premium renewal that was more in line with what the claims experience had been for this group. And I have to say that that premium renewal was a real shocker.
All right. Any other questions? I think we've earned a break. is where we're at.
I agree.
Between the numbers and just the information we collected this morning. Are you guys good with, say, a lunch break at this point in time? When would you like to reconvene, Ella?
We'll kind of leave that up to you.
I'd say let's reconvene at about 12:45. I think we'll need some time in there to kind of digest some of the numbers that Gary has given us this morning, as well as have some lunch. I've got 11:30, is that right?
Yeah.
12:45 work for your team?
Yes, it does.
Okay, all right. That's what we'll do. We'll see you guys in a little bit.
Lucinda, can you and I have a conversation very quickly?
Absolutely.
Any additional microphones? There's two right there, but there aren't any.
They're gonna be on a different frequency. We have to find our guide.
I can.